Okay, good. Welcome to the Gary and Stein Sports Show. Alongside my co-host Will Stein, I'm Troy Gary. Our podcast is available on Apple, Spotify, and Anchor, and now Amazon. On today's show, we're joined by NFL innovator, a man who established himself over 32 years in the NFL as arguably the greatest special teams coach in NFL history, and now has a new book out titled "Figure It Out: My 32-Year Journey While Revolutionizing Pro Football Special Teams." Coach Mike Westhoff. Mike, thanks for joining us today.
No, I'm happy to do so. I see you. This is coming. I can tell by your outfit you don't live down here in Florida where I am, so I can see the difference there.
No, it's pretty cold up here usually year round. So, Mike, let's start by talking about the early years of your NFL career, specifically when you were in Baltimore and how you got the start of being a special teams coordinator.
Yeah, that's a good question. Really, I'm going to ask. I won't tell it all because I want to save one part of my getting into the NFL for reading my book, because it's a really unique story as to how it happened. My first meeting with Frank Kush was something that I don't want to give away, frankly, but it was really pretty cool. Anyway, I got hired at Baltimore with the Colts with Frank Kush that went there after he had left Arizona State. He went up to Canadian League for a year and I got hired in Baltimore. I got hired. When I went there, he told me he had several jobs and he wasn't sure how to do it. He needed a strength coach. He wanted a tight ends coach. He wanted an assistant offensive line coach. He needed someone to help him. And he said, maybe help with special teams. And I told him, I'll do them all. I said, I'll do them all. He looked at me like he started to laugh. And I said, no, trust me, I'll do them all. I said, now I did them all. I don't know if I did any of them very well, to be honest with you, but I did them all. And the special teams job, we had started the 82 year. We played 2 games, and then the NFL went on strike. They had the strike back then. And so I was in Towson, Maryland, jogging one day, and that's a whole story, what we did during the strike. Read that one, but that's pretty cool. Not so cool for us, the way we had to work, but anyway. Frank came up to me and told me he was going to fire a special teams coach. He said, Mike, this guy's terrible. He said, and I talked him out of firing him. I said, look, he works with the secondary. Let him help those guys, and I'll take it over. Oh, way to go, Mike. I didn't know anything about it, zero. Now, the good news for me was that we were on strike, and I had a chance to try to start to learn. Now, the guy that I was taking his place, he had a notebook. The notebook should have been crayons. I mean, it was ridiculous. It was terrible. It was the worst notebook I ever saw. So here I start from scratch. And then I just started going through rules, and I wrote a notebook. I designed the whole thing and spent a lot of time doing it. So all of a sudden, I'm a special teams coach also. But the thing that I learned in a hurry was that at that time, because at that time there were no special teams coordinators, it just was kind of spread out amongst the staff. And I learned in a hurry that there was absolutely zero innovation. Everything was pretty much the same. Every team did pretty much the same thing. But there was also almost zero regulation. So I could pretty much try anything. And I did. I developed a philosophy of, well, I wanted to teach coverage. I based that off of a defensive philosophy and how I wanted to run a return. I turned that into an offensive philosophy. On defense, I wanted to blitz. So I went in to see Bud Carson, one of the great defensive coordinators in NFL history. And I said, teach me your parameters of how to blitz. I took my coverage and designed it after that. I don't, you could ask anybody the toughest coverage they ever had to face. I promise you, they're going to tell you it was ours. What we did was really pretty cool. And then on offense, I wanted it to be a power off tackle running play. So we double teamed, we trapped, we used a wedge to kick out, et cetera, and came up with a whole philosophy there. So, I was able to take it because it's kind of like any business. Right time, right place. I was at the right time in the right place. So eventually, not only myself, but a number of guys who kind of got involved a little bit. I think I kind of led the parade, but there was a number of us, and we took it to a very innovative and creative part of the game. And it just peaked, it blossomed, and it became very much a part of winning football. And so not just contributing or keeping from losing, but actually winning. And so it developed all throughout the league. it went to a point where it reached a pinnacle. It has since been diluted and dropped down to a point where it's not very many plays any longer. So that's how I got involved in it. Very, very accidentally, but was in the right place at the right time.
Okay, and if you want to hear more about this story, get Mike's book, mascotbooks.com. Available now, delivered right to your door. I just ordered 3 of them, so mine will be here any day now. So, and also in July, you can get them on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, any major book seller. Will, do you have any questions for Mike?
So, with the book being titled Figure It Out, it always reminds me of my father. He said if I wanted something, figure it out or you're not getting it. So it's kind of a simple message, really. But with your book, tell me what the true meaning of figure it out is from the Mike Westhoff perspective.
Okay, that's a good point. The idea was, when I started, I didn't know much about this. Well, now all of a sudden, here I am. And I learned in a hurry that one of the things about special teams is that there were so many variables. I could do a lot of different things. I just had to figure it out. And one of the things that happened early in my career, when I went to Miami with Coach Shula, we had Dan Marino was our quarterback. And he was pretty good. Anybody doesn't remember, I was pretty good. And so our whole offense was built around him. And a lot of our team was built around that. So that meant, all of a sudden, we might be keeping a wide receiver to help Dan. Well, all of a sudden I had to find a place for him. Okay, well, he's pretty good for Dan, but how's he going to be covering a kickoff? Well, I had to figure it out. So I became creative. I designed roles. So you may have a specific role, and I could line you up anywhere, but your role never changed. So I was able to simplify it, but yet at the same time, make it complex, because on the other side, they didn't know what we were doing. So I had to figure it out. I was forced to figure it out because of the fact I didn't have just every single player that I wanted. Here's a team that's we're throwing all of our resources to Dan Marino. Okay, well, what's Mike supposed to do? I got to cover a kickoff. Who am I going to cover it with? I didn't have an all-star team, so I figured it out. I had to come up with different ways. And I learned early from when you'll read about this also, an incident that happened with me with Bear Bryant. I had visited Tuscaloosa and I was with him by myself. He and I. It's a great story. And at the end of this story, we're actually, believe this or not, we were walking through the campus. He was older then and had gotten tired. And he asked me to sit down and rest. We were sitting on a curb on a street, under a tree in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, Bear Bryant and me. And he said to me, Coach, I'm going to give you 2 pieces of advice. Don't be afraid to change. Don't ever be afraid. He said, I held back on a change that I wish I had probably done a little earlier. He said, but the key thing is make the change. That's one. I won't tell you the other. You have to read it. But it's pretty cool. So my whole career, I never forgot that. So I wasn't afraid to change. I got to figure something out. I believe that each single week I designed a totally different game plan. What I also learned pretty early was that in special teams, I basically had a timeout before every play. I had a timeout because the play, it was after a kickoff, there was the return or whatever. So I drew everything. And I would get in the huddle, instead of having 1 kickoff return, I'd have 12. All I had to do is hold it up. I'd hold up and say, William, here's what you got now. And you never made a mistake because you knew exactly how to do it. But you didn't make a mistake. Now the problem that we presented were nearly endless. So that's kind of how I figured it out.
Okay, and speaking of legendary coaches, you worked under quite a few, and my question is, how was it working under the legendary late Hall of Fame coach Don Shula?
It was the most incredible experience. When I was there with Don, and I referenced it this way, Don Shula was not the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. Don Shula was the head coach of the National Football League. He ran the whole business. There's nothing that went on in the NFL that Don Shula wasn't apprised to. He was part of everything. He was a brilliant, brilliant coach. He could walk in any meeting room and take it over. He could come in with Williams, the big guy, he'd be in the offensive line. He could kind of present his, he'd go over with you. You're playing defensive back, and he'd sit down and take over your meeting. He could do it all. He studied everything. When I was there, we had that great offense, Marino, Duper, Clayton, et cetera, Matt Moore, Jim Jensen. Don called the plays from the sideline with no script. No script. He memorized it. He memorized it right top of his head. He was a special coach. He knew every rule. He could manage the clock. He could conduct the game. He knew when to challenge. He knew when to use timeouts. And he put that pressure on us. Don't forget, back then, I was at the Miami Dolphins the other day. I was over at their mini camp practice last Thursday. And I was thinking, when I was here, we had 7 or 8 coaches. They have 29. 20. I don't know where the heck is how you'd even have a meeting. You have to go in the auditorium, I guess. But in those days, we did everything. And Don put a lot of pressure on us to do that job. So I learned how to scout. I learned how to deal with the rules. I learned how officiating is supposed to work. And he did it all with a realm of discipline and yet elegance. Don was a creative person, but he always had pride about him. We never cheated. There was none of that. There was never a cheap shot type team. That wasn't who he was. He had the integrity of the business foremost. And believe me, you better understand it if you were going to work for him. So I always tease about it, tell people when I worked with him, he asked me 100,000 questions, of which none of them was ever really a question. Mike, you're going to take that second bus tonight, right? That meant, Mike, get your butt on the second bus. And it was fun. I in my book, I referenced a lot of the guys that played for me. I referred to them as my guys. I'm proud to know that I was one of his guys. I'm also very proud of all the people that work for him. I'm the only one that won a Lifetime Achievement Award by the media. And that means a lot to me. I'm the only one of his guys that ever did that. And so I think he would have been very, very proud of that.
Awesome. Will, what do you got next for Mike here?
So you mentioned Dan Marino, who is one of the best quarterbacks of all time. You've been around 3 of them. Dan Marino, obviously, Drew Brees, and Brett Favre for his single season in New York. How would you compare those 3 guys, and what did those 3 guys have an impact on your specific head coaching career, or just you as an individual in general?
That's a good point. That's a good threesome right there. Now that you mentioned those 3 guys, you were all in the Hall of Fame. The other one's on his way. Each one of them were very different in their way. Brett was probably the more of the gunslinger. He had a rifle for an arm. And he was the gunslinger. He would move and all of a sudden fire it. He could just do that. Dan worked at his skill more than what people might realize. Everyone thinks Dan he had that great quick release, but Dan worked very hard at it. So Dan did that exceptionally well. I was with Dan the longest, so I have a little bit more of an allegiance toward Dan, knowing what he did over those years. Dan doesn't have the Super Bowl, doesn't have the ring like the other 2 guys do, and that, of course, takes a little something away. But Dan Marino's the person least responsible for that fact. And Dan could have taken 25 teams to the Super Bowl the way he worked and the talent that he had. Each one of them brought a lot to the table. Drew Brees was very much a program guy, one of the hardest, most disciplined workers I ever saw in my 32-year career. I mean, Drew Brees really worked. He really worked. Now, he was also the recipient of a very, very, very good coach in Sean Payton. Those 2 worked together exceptionally well. And that I used to sit there on a Wednesday or Thursday and watch a play, and I'd see that exact same thing on Sunday. I mean, exact. And I just knew. Now, Drew was really good at that. So, but each one had a tremendous pride. Each one did everything right. They all worked hard. If I had to say anyone is a little bit more from the hip, it would have been Brett. He was kind of the gunslinger. He could just show up and go get it done. He had such confidence in himself. Plus, his arm strength was just like almost no one's. I remember Keith Jackson was a tight end that used to play for us. And he told me that when he went to Green Bay, he would never even play catch with Brett Favre if he didn't have a helmet on. Never. He said he threw the ball so hard. He said, I always wanted to make sure I had a helmet on. If I didn't catch it, it was going to smack me right in the face. So each one of them, in their own way, was tremendous, but each one yet somewhat different in how they handled things. But when you walked out on the field, and those guys got in the huddle, the way they commanded discipline in the huddle, when they broke the huddle, the way they called plays, you knew that they knew what they were doing. They had tremendous knowledge of their skills, tremendous. So yeah, it was three pretty good guys to be around.
All right. Well, my next question for you, Mike. In 1988, you were diagnosed with bone cancer in your leg, and you dealt with over 10 major surgeries over the course of years, and you didn't beat it not once, but 3 different times. Just talk about the support you had from the Dolphins and the Jets while you're going through that around the league, and people that are battling cancer right now. Can you give them a message of how you use grit and determination and how you fought to get through all that?
Yeah, it came out of nowhere. They believed that I was having a problem with my back. I wrote about this actually, which I did not, but I had a sciatic pain through my thigh. It turned out to be a malignant tumor, primary bone cancer, osteogenic sarcoma, which at that time only had a 20% survival rate. The first thing you have to do is to make sure you can find a way to get to the right place to get to the right people. There's just like anything else, medicine comes in different levels, and try to find a way to get to the best that you can. Research, don't take no for an answer. Talk to people. One of the things I learned very early was not to be afraid to ask a doctor, if this were happening to you, what would you do? What would you do? Where would you go? You can just constantly stay on top. Fortunately for me, I ended up going to a physician up in Boston, a guy named Henry Macon, that invented the surgery I had. He invented it, so he was pretty good. Then I went to an oncologist that was a genius. I ended up at Sloan Kettering with a doctor named Dr. John Healy, that if you talk to orthopedic guys, they would probably tell you this is the top guy in the country, maybe in the world. So I was fortunate. I was with the right people. And then you never give up. You just keep trying. Take each day, one day at a time. It's no fun. It's just not much fun. Now, fortunately for me, the teams that I were with in the NFL, they're tremendous. They had great insurance. They took care of their people. And then I was able to go through this and miss very little time. I probably didn't look too good. I was, when I went through chemotherapy, I had no hair. I was just a shade of green, and I'm trying to look up on your shelf. I don't see anything that looks as bad as I did. You just learn how to deal with it. I know there was a doctor that told me one time, he said, Mike, don't let this define your life. He said, you want to go to dinner, go to dinner. He said, just don't worry, go. Just be yourself, keep going, and it'll improve. It'll get better each day. And so I did that. People don't know this. I mean, there was a time when I had to wear long pants, but I coached on the field with a catheter. Try that. That's not the easiest thing to do. I would go outside and I'd walk around. I'd throw up in the grass. I'd rinse my mouth out and I'd get right back on the field. I coached with a cane all those years. I didn't care. I said, I don't care if I have a cane. I'm going to do this job better than you did it, better than anyone ever did. That's my goal. So you have to keep things in a perspective and you keep moving. And, and that's what I think I was able to do. And I had tremendous help from my family, my friends, a religious belief, whatever. You kind of tie it all together and you find a way to get through it. And I didn't do anything that so many people have to do every day. There I was just in I was in a position where people would see it, and they would see me, walk around with a cane. Back before all that happened, I was pretty athletic. I mean, when I first went to the combine back in 1982, I used to with Zeke Bratkowski. You remember Zeke Bratkowski, the quarterback from Green Bay? Yeah. He was our offensive coordinator. And I would go with Zeke to the combine, and I threw into receiver drills at the combine. Now they see this guy walking around with a cane and grouchy and yells at everybody. They think I could have never done that, but I did that. I was pretty athletic back then. So my life dramatically changed. The idea is, okay, this is what you're presented with. Figure out how to deal with it. Figure it out. And I think I did that to the best of my ability. But believe me, I had tremendous help. And I was able to get through it. And I kept breaking the graft, and I did that a lot of times, which kind of baffled everybody, but I just lived my life. I wasn't going to change it. And so sometimes that set me back a little, but I feel pretty good that I was able to do it.
Awesome stuff. Will, your next question for Mike.
So I spoke to one of your players who played with the Jets last night, Steve Martin. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he talked to me about Santana Moss. What did you see? What did you see out of Santana Moss that made him such a good fit for your system or your scheme?
Oh, he was our number one draft pick when I first went there as a receiver. He was a great wide receiver from the University of Miami, tremendous speed, but he also was a punt returner for me. And as a punt returner, he led the league. We were first in the NFL. Santana had great hands, could catch the ball very well. But what Santana could do is his acceleration was like off the charts. I always referred to him as being, he was sudden. Boom, he'd get it and go. I mean, he was really special in that regard. And so, he was such a talent. He got banged up a little bit, and that set him back with me some. But there was a time when we were just incredible, because I had Santana returning punts, Chad Morton returning kickoffs. There was a point in time one year during the year, we were about 3/4 of the way through the year, and I was doing a scouting report, and I was writing things up. Santana Moss was first in the NFL in punt returns. Chad Morton was first in the NFL in kickoff returns, and Chad Morton was second in the NFL in punt returns. Nobody's going to touch that record. They're not even going to touch that one. That's what we did. And Santana was a big part of that. And he was such a talented football player. It was really fun to be around him. And that was the thing where I was a little bit involved in the draft. And I won't say that I picked him, but I certainly helped. I went to the University of Miami. I talked to their coaches about him. And I loved him because he could catch that ball, and he was instantly into the return, instantly. And we led the league. We were first. So he was pretty special.
All right. Mike, you've coached over 650 National Football League games. But there's one game that I would like to ask you about, and that was the 2002 opening kickoff game against the Bills up in Buffalo. Buffalo fans basically say that's one of their worst losses in franchise history besides the Super Bowls. And special teams coach at the time, Danny Smith, said this was probably his worst game of his career. Just talk about that game, what you remember from it, and anything that you want to add from that game.
Well, I'm gonna correct Danny just a little bit. I know Danny; he's a friend of mine. I hate to correct him. One of the worst games of his career. That's the worst game of anybody's career. he got destroyed. I would argue that's the best special teams game ever played in NFL history. Now, I know there's some other arguments on that one, but I'm going to go with that. We were a good group. We were just a good group we put together, and I was loaded with guys. And not only that game, we rushed the punter, put pressure on the punter. Everything we kicked perfectly. We made all our kicks. Our kickoff coverage looked like it should be a training reel. What we did, they had no clue. We were killing them. And then we ran a kickoff return for a touchdown early in the game. It was a check with me. By the way, I saw in the film breakdown that they were lining up a specific way. The kicker was very specific, and I knew exactly where he was going to kick the ball. So I waited till the last second, and then I would signal it whether we would run a particular return that I had called, whether we would run it right or left. And we ran the first one to the left, we ran the second one to the right. I called them both, and we beat them in overtime. It was just a great game of which special teams not only was a viable contributor, but really had a dramatic impact on winning that game. But everything we did that day was pretty much off the charts, and it set the bar for where I was expecting us to be as a unit in the NFL, and we pretty closely sustained it throughout that year, and really a number of the years that I was there. We were pretty close to doing that. We were good.
All right, Will, what do you got?
All that 80,000 people were sitting there expecting, a big sudden death. They were all, the stands were packed. Well, they only got one play, and then they had to go home. So I was pretty happy and pretty proud of that one.
Awesome stuff.
Now, I know when you were talking about your story, Don Shula, how you had to memorize every rule book, make sure there was no cheating involved, how you guys didn't cheat. When you were in New York, the Spygate story came up. Right. What do you remember about the Spygate story, and what can you share with us from what you experienced out of Spygate and what it was like to compete against the Patriots?
The guy was involved in filming it, came to work for us, so I know him very well. I won't divulge any names, but I know him. They did it. They were involved in it. There was a guy that was very much involved. It helped a lot. A guy named Ernie Adams. He was involved. How that all worked, to be honest with you, I'm not really sure. I believe to some degree they did these things. The thing that I always also believe is that they didn't need to do any of them. I thought they were very talented, very well coached. So to me, any of the things that New England got accused of being involved in the cheating part of it, I used to just sort of shake my head. I thought to myself, why would you guys be involved in this? You're good anyway. You don't need this. How much at what level it happened, I honestly don't know. I couldn't tell you. I believe, from what I do know, that there was a level of involvement. I believe that. How much do I know? I don't know. So I'm not going to accuse. There's a couple things I definitely can accuse them of. But that one, that was out there. Where it went, I just know this. If it really happened the way it was, that we've all heard about, they didn't need to do it. They did not. They were good. If they did it, it's their own stupidity. It's their own selfishness. But that was a good football team that could beat you in 100 different ways. So if they felt they needed to do something like that, then they should be ashamed, because it wasn't necessary. What degree it ever took place, I don't know. I was on the other side. I know lots of little things that happened. I point lots of fingers to it. Frankly, personally, I believe that they were involved in different aspects of it. To what degree? I don't know. I just know when I lined up against them, I thought they were a very good football team, well coached, and did a lot of things exceptionally well. I used to love to play them. There was a real challenge. Don't forget when the first game after 9/11 was when we went up there and played them. When Mo Lewis, our linebacker, hit Bledsoe, and they bring in Tom Brady. This little skinny kid comes in the game. We're all standing there thinking, who the hell is this guy? Well, we all found out he's a pretty good football player, and we won that game. But that turned their whole franchise around. Matter of fact, New England should erect a statue to Mo Lewis. You should put one up in front of the stadium, because that's the reason that Tom Brady got on the field. There's no other reason, because they wouldn't have put him in. They weren't going to do it. So did they need it? Were they cheating? Yeah, I kind of think there was some cheating involved. Do I know specifically? Only in a couple instances. Did they need it? Nah, come on, guys. They're good anyway.
All right. Over your career, you've dealt with a lot of players, and I just want to know, who are some that you pounded the table, so to speak, during cut downs for a roster spot that normally the coach probably would have cut?
Good question. I'll go. You're going to have to read this one. I will not tell you this whole story, because this is really pretty cool. I'll go with Bernie Parmalee. Bernie Parmalee was a running back from Ball State. I signed him. He was working for UPS loading trucks when I got him. Came in and fought to make our team. We had cut him twice, brought him back. There's a story about my bringing him back. You got to buy it to read it, because it's pretty good. No, you couldn't do it today. You could not do it today. But back then, I took a chance. I took a shot, and it worked. But he's a guy that I fought exceptionally hard for. And then there's some other type guys that, Larry Izzo, when I went down, I went out to Texas Tech to work out Zach Thomas, and we drafted him in the 5th round. But then I also, on that same trip, went down to Rice and worked out Larry Izzo. He's a linebacker. He's 5'9.5". He weighed 213 pounds. Played 13 years in the NFL, went to three or four Pro Bowls, has 3 Super Bowl rings. Now he's a special teams coach at Seattle. So that was probably a good guy to take a chance on. Linebacker, 5'9.5", 213. But he figured it out, and I figured out what to do with him. And he ended up with a great career. So, yeah, there was plenty of guys like that. Same thing up in New York. There was always, those kind of guys that we took the chance on. I didn't have to pound the table, but Brad Smith was that type of guy. He was a quarterback. Now we're going to make him a wide receiver and a return specialist. I went to Missouri. It's not like I had to pound the table for Brad, but that was someone that we had to kind of reconfigure, and he did a tremendous job. Helped us win a lot of games. So, you just get in that position. Taysom Hill. I'm walking in the locker room in New Orleans. I see this kid coming out of the shower wrapped in a towel. He looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I went, who's this guy? And he's a quarterback. Never dresses. I went to Sean Payton. Next thing you know, he's the best special teams player in the NFC. He's the real deal. He's the reason when we played Minnesota, that punt block that got blocked, I knew he could beat their wing. He was beating their wing, and he was going to block the punt. The guy hurried it up and drove it into the middle, and guy that we had in there, I can't think of his name right now, blocks the punt and gave us a chance to win the game, which we should have won, but we didn't. Make a long story short, Taysom Hill was some key there. So the list of those guys goes on and on and on, and I can't just give you all of them, but those are a couple. If I had to go back and pick the one craziest one, Bernie Parmalee. That's the guy. And he played 9 years in the league. And I believe as a special teams player, he was the best hitter that ever played because he would knock your socks right off. Who was he tough? You want to play against him, you better make sure that chin straps buckle.
All right. Well, what else you got for Mike?
So speaking of that Minnesota game, that if memory serves me correctly, that was the Minneapolis Miracle game.
That's right.
What was loud? How was it like on that sideline once you saw that Stephon Diggs catch? And two, what was the loudest venue that you've ever heard in the National Football League? Because that was a pretty loud venue after that play happened.
Yeah, that was the Minnesota Stadium is spectacular. We went up there for that play. I had never been there before. I thought it was tremendous. The way the whole thing is set up, fans are great. They got that big horn, that blow that big horn. It was pretty cool. They do a heck of a job. They were a good team. And it was a hard-fought game. At the end of the game, we blocked that punt and had a chance to win the game. And then they were driving down the field. I actually wrote in great detail about this whole thing, but we really just were not in the correct defense, in my opinion. That they had what, eight or 9 seconds left, no timeouts. They're on the 38-yard line. They got to get to midfield to try a 60-yard field goal, or whatever. They're going to run a 3-tiered route to the short side, kind of go A, B, C, try to get the ball and step out of bounds or get a penalty. If the ball was in the middle of the field, they wouldn't have time to get up and block it. They didn't have time. And we were playing a 2-deep secondary and rush 4. And when you do that with the 2 deep, yeah, we got over there in time, but didn't make the play. I believe if we had been in a 3 deep, we'd have had a guy standing there, and he would have known he had help coming over, and that play would have never occurred. He might have caught the ball, but we'd tackle it easily and make the play. So I believe that was a defensive error that we got involved in a little bit there. I believe that. I mean, that's just my philosophy. The crowd went crazy, just went crazy. At that time, that was right before I had rebroken a graft, and I was on crutches. I had a very lengthy surgery just a short while after that when I went back to New York, and I was just trying to go game to game, and I did not leave the bench when that crowd stormed the field. I sat on the bench for a half hour, and I never moved. I didn't want to fight the crowd. I didn't want to go in the locker room. I didn't want to see anybody. I was sick because I really liked our football team, and we were playing really good on special teams at that time, and I was excited to be a part of it, to have a chance to help them win. And then the crowd stormed the field, and they were going crazy, and I just sat there by myself and didn't move. Actually, I only went back in the locker room right before I had to get on the bus because I wasn't going to fight that mess. The loudest stadium, New Orleans, when it's rocking and rolling, because of the confines of that dome. It can get so loud you can't even hear anything. I mean, you can barely talk. That's the place that to me. Kansas City can knock your socks off. Seattle can really get crazy. They're tremendously loud. And Minnesota's right there. They're fighting it. That crowd does a great job. That's a great home field advantage. I think Minnesota is a beautiful place. I was very, very impressed with that stadium.
Okay, I want to follow up on that punt block with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Was that a specific design, or was that just a straight punt block?
No, it's designed. Everything's designed exactly. I lined up. We had brought a defensive lineman in at the end. George
Johnson.
George Johnson.
Yeah.
And then we put him in the A gap where the center would have to block him. All right, right next to him, I lined up David Onyemata, big defensive tackle, weighed 300 some pounds, and I knew he would penetrate through that guard. So the guard would not be able to help the center like he needed to do. I created an overload to that side, so I knew the center would have to go there. Then the fullback was going to have to block. We ran a guy around the other way. We kept him out. That put their tackle one-on-one on one of my defensive backs, who was pretty fast. I knew he could pressure him. Then that put Taysom Hill one-on-one against your wing. And I knew that wing would not block Taysom Hill. So I knew I was going to get tremendous pressure off that side. And then the punter, if he tried to stay over there, he'd have to punt into Taysom. If he tried to go into the middle, David Onyemata would drive that through the outside shoulder of that guard and get him turned, where he couldn't block Big David and also help the center. So the center was going to be in a real bind. He had to block George. And here's George, 6'5". And what happened? The punter hurried it up, drove the ball right into George's big outstretched arm, bam, and we blocked it. It was just, we had practiced it. It was a good design. I believed it would work. And I thought one of two things is going to happen here. And it did. It happened exactly the way that we drew it up, although I thought Taysom maybe would get it also. And we got him. We blocked it. We got the ball right there and gave, Drew Brees the short field. He's going to score. He's going to score from there. And he did, and gave us a chance to win the football game. So sometimes a punt block, I believe they're very strategic. You don't just line up and rush it. Everything has to be exactly. I tried a million different ones, but each one had a specific design and goal. And that was exactly the way I drew it up. So that worked pretty cool. That was a fun one.
Okay, Mike, I don't mean to bring up another sore subject, but a year later, you're in the NFC Championship game against the Rams. Early on in the game, the Rams did a punt fake. Johnny Hecker throwing the ball to Sam Shields for a first down. Do you remember what happened there?
Yeah, thanks a lot for bringing that up.
Sorry.
That's the one that wakes me up at night. The Hecker had thrown more fakes than anybody in NFL history. I chronicalized the whole thing when I wrote about it, how many he had done. I went back and studied every one, including when the Rams were at St. Louis. I had them all on film. We studied everything he did. He loved to punt the ball to his left, and he threw the fakes to his right. That was his favorite. So I came up with what I felt was maybe my best, most creative scheme that I'd maybe ever designed. I had 5 defensive linemen playing, plus Taysom Hill. I was going to play a 7-man front the whole game. And we were going to rush those 5 guys all the time. So I knew we would pressure Hecker like nobody's business. He took one extra split second, we were going to block him. And we'd have the guys in there to stop any fake, etc. On our right side, we doubled. We call them flyers, but you call them gunners maybe. We doubled that guy. On the other side, we singled it. But now I took that defensive back, I moved him 2 yards to the inside, and backed him off 5 yards. And on the snap of the ball, he was just to drift back, see what was happening. You look for a triangle at the gunner and into the quarterback. If there was a fake, if you throw the ball from punt formation, there is no pass interference. You can just go up and smack the guy. Now, there can be a personal foul, but no pass interference. So I put the guy in a perfect position to do nothing but that. And I practiced it. Plus, I had these 5 guys inside that were going to kill them. They were going to no matter what. So they came out and they changed the flyer out there. They kind of so Taysom Hill. We only had one thing we were doing the whole time. He called a little bit of a safe off it, which was perfect. So everybody loosened up. And we're sitting there playing for a fake, which I practiced every single day. But no one else. I made a mistake. The corner on that side that was by himself was a very good football player for me and had done a heck of a job. But he was very much a proactive player. He's a guy that you just exploded down the field. He was the guy that would just take off and go. Justin Hardy. He did a great job. I put him in a reactive position where he had to kind of drift and just react. Now, in practice, he stopped it every single time. And I actually had Teddy Bridgewater, our quarterback, be Hecker and throw the ball. But I wanted the ball thrown really well. I didn't want Tom Morstead thrown it. I wanted Teddy. So that's how hard we practiced it. We stopped it every single day. They called it. Here it is. We're sitting there prepared to do what we had practiced every day. I'm thinking to myself, they're going to run a fake here. We're going to kill them. Because there's no pass interference. All you can do is run over and hit the guy. What did he do? Yeah, he backed up just the way. Hecker takes a step like he's going to punt, and he pulls up to throw the ball to his right, exactly where we knew he'd throw the ball. What did my proactive guy do? He made a mistake. As he went to go to the ball, the receiver, he turned his back. He turned his back. And when he turned his back, they caught the ball. I almost died. I was going to die. What I should have done, I should have flipped those corners where he would have been in a little bit more of an aggressive spot. And I put the other corner who was a little more reactive type guy in that spot. That's a mistake that I made in personnel. I made the mistake. Even though in practice, the guy that I had there, he did it every single time. He did it right. Every time. We get in a game, here it comes. Here it comes, guys. They're going to do it. Everybody's yelling. We know it. This guy's art. He's not up on the ball in a bump and run. He's 5 yards back. And he just drifts back. When he sees the ball, run over there and knock the heck out of the guy. What did he do when he ran over? But I put a very proactive player. This guy's going to fly down the field. I had him in all those other roles. I made the mistake of not flip-flopping my personnel. That's the one I can wake up in the middle of the night and I'm not going back to sleep. I just lay there and think, you stupid Mike. All you had to do was change those guys. Everything you did was, I thought it was maybe one of the most strategic designs I ever had in my career, how to play these guys. I really believe that. I said, I got them. They're dead. Every time they punted the ball, it looked like we were going to kill them. We only had one return, either catch it, go straight ahead, or run back across the field, run to daylight. They were dead. It was a great plan, and I screwed it up. So thanks for bringing that up. You ruined my whole day, but other than that, so.
I'm sorry, Mike. No,
it's okay, but that's what happened. You're right. Now they got a field goal out of it, but we were just killing them. Did that field goal make the difference in the game? No. In my opinion, yes. That's the one that bothered me. But nonetheless, then of course the crazy play at the end where we didn't get the pass interference or the helmet to helmet, the worst missed call in officiating history, not just football, officiating history because of what was at stake. We'd have got the ball on the 2-yard line. We're going to Super Bowl. But it didn't happen. Last game of my career.
Well, I admire your bluntness and your honesty about that. And speaking of that pass interference penalty, of course, the whole world was outraged by that. What did you think of the NFL the following year instituting the pass interference to be challenged? Did you think it was kind of a mockery, or I don't know what to say, basically just kind of appease the backlash they faced from that? Of course, you're not going to get fined here, Mike, so just tell me exactly what you thought about that.
It's total BS. They knew they made the mistake. They knew they blew it, that they didn't have a way to solve that problem. An official in the booth that would have just said, hey, let's replay this guy. Let's take a look at this. Let's take a look. They'd have taken a look. They'd have gotten it right. That's what everybody wants, is the right call. And I was involved when they first came out with, to go back and to replay. I remember Coach Shula talking with me about it, the reason for it, et cetera, et cetera. But just get the right call. If it hurts you, too bad. You did it. Give me the right call. And so they have a chance to do that. And then we suffered with the terrible call. The fact that they came back the next year with a kind of a half-assed, in my opinion, approach to it, they didn't really have a good answer for it. They didn't have an answer. I mean, to me, the answer was really pretty simple. Find a way to have someone in the booth that on whatever kind of, if there's a crazy play, not every little single thing, but on something catastrophic, be able to stop it no matter what and get a replay. And they didn't have that. They had no way to do that. And we suffered the consequences of. Don't forget, not only was there no pass interference, the next day, that defender was fined a lot of money for helmet to helmet. He got fined. Oh yeah, everybody in the world knew this was a terrible call, and yet the NFL has no way to solve it. And then they come up with in my opinion, a kind of a half-hearted, I'm being kind because I'm on the air, way to solve the problem. And that's not, I love the National Football League. I was honored to have worked there, but that was a real mistake that was solved. That really was never solved, in my opinion. It just it's a shame that think something like that, because there is an answer to it. There's an answer, and they didn't have the answer. So, yeah, it was a mess. It was a mess. And what the moves they made the next year, as you mentioned, it never really came to fruition. Anytime that happened, it was like, well, they didn't do anything. And so it's just that was just really not handled very well. It just, I'll go back to the days that when I first really got rolling with everything when I was in New York. Mike Pereira was the director of officials. I thought Mike was really good, really sharp, and took NFL officiating to a point of prominence. I would have liked to know how Mike would have handled that exactly. What would have been his thoughts on what should have taken place? Because that's a guy that, in my opinion, was as good an NFL official that there's ever been. And he's not like my best buddy, because when they goofed up, I used to scream at him. I used to throw the phone, but I thought he was pretty doggone good. I learned a lot from him. So I would have always been interested to say, okay, Mike, what should have happened here? How should have this been resolved? What should have been in place? That to me would be an interesting question.
Okay. Will, you got anything else for Mike?
So I know at the beginning you said don't be afraid for change. With all these college athletes doing all these name, image, and likeness, NIL, what is your feeling on that NIL deal overall and how it's being used for recruiting and all that good stuff?
Wow, you're bringing up a really philosophical question. I have some good friends that are in college coaching, and a number of them have told me that very thing will get them out of the business. That's something that's very difficult to deal with, that they don't want to be involved in it. I see some of it. You have coaches being paid millions and millions of dollars, and you've got players that really don't have availability. I'd like to see a limit put on all of it, the way it's got to be under some type of control, because of the fact that, okay, where does it go? Do I just come out as a good athlete and say, okay, I'm being recruited by, let's see, I'm real good. I'm in the Southeast down here where I live. And I want to say, okay, I got Florida State, Alabama, Georgia wants me, Texas A&M. Now I'm going to go in and just say, okay, how much money? How much are you going to pay? Are you going to pay? I think that's ridiculous. I think that's, now to be able to get something, I'm okay with that. I'm okay, but I think it needs to be regulated, or it's just going to wreck something that we've had very, very well. I just, I'm a big football fan. I kind of like the purity of it in a way. I understand a guy should be able to get a little something. The transfer portal, that's a little bit crazy also. So I think they've got some things ahead of them. For all of a sudden, we're going to see a handful of colleges playing the major role, and all the rest of the colleges that don't have as much are going to be kind of stuck. So it's got to find a direction. That exact direction, to be honest with you, I really don't know enough to say, but it's got to have some type of cap. I don't think a guy can just, it's going to be a great thing for football, be able to lock into, I as a college coach come into your home and I'm recruiting you. I come in, I'm sitting with your mother and father. I say, all right, Will, and the first question you have for me is how much money? I don't know, Will, I did it back in the day. I'm tempted to want to get up and run out of the house, but that's just me. I'm a little bit different on that, but do I understand? Yeah, I think there's a place for it. It's got to get under some type of control. If it's not, I don't know where it's going to end up. It's going to end up a mess, and that's what I'm afraid that can happen, because you've got a great game, and there's already been enough problems in the sport I hate to see it, there's a safety thing we all have to be smart with. I saw a thing where the state of Arkansas was looking at eliminating high school football. I don't know why, money problems, it's not going to happen, but there was the debate, and they were having so many issues, kids not being able to afford to play. I think that's, I grew up with it. That was my way as a young person to go to college. I had no other way. I had to figure it out. I needed a scholarship. Well, I found a way to get one. I was able to do something with my life. So you want to have everybody get that chance. I mean, I didn't grow up, with a silver spoon. My family, I was the oldest of 6 kids. We didn't have any money. I grew up in a row house in the city, where in my neighborhood, you don't even walk through it today. Whoa, it was pretty tough. Now we moved to a suburb area when I was in high school, and I went to a normal high school, I guess you could say. But, I love what football's done for so many people. I want to see everyone have that opportunity, and I don't want to see it get destroyed. And I worry about that happening. I think they'll solve it, but I hope they take some methods, or it's going to get to be a mess.
Okay, Mike, I got a couple questions left for you before I let you go. Thanks for joining us. Player safety has kind of dramatically changed special teams. What do you think of the changes that were implemented, moving the kickoff spot up, some of the other changes with blocking and not be able to do that? So can you give me your take on the changes, and do you think that are they helpful, or do you think they're just kind of watering down special teams?
Well, they've definitely watered it down. Some of them, actually, I was at a function this past fall with Roger Goodell, and he was teasing me. They say, Mike, you'd be the last one to complain about the rule changes. We had to make most of them because of you. So I kind of appreciated that. Some of them were necessary. Some of them were good changes. I believe that you can make some changes. Like, one of the great plays is kickoff return. I mean, I love it. I think it's the thing I did the best. I don't want to just take the play out of the game. They've changed a lot. They changed how you can run down and cover. You can't double team or trap or wedge. Okay, so you basically changed that kickoff return into a punt return. I'm okay with that as long as I still have the play. So what I would do to keep the play alive, I'd do everything they're doing now, because that covers a lot of things safely. Okay, but I would play with 3 balls. 1 ball, both the offense and defense have their own ball that they take into the officials before the game. They check for pounds per square inch, and they use that. The other ball is a kicking ball that's buffed up a little bit. It's a little friendly. It compacts. It's a good friendly ball, but it also can go pretty good. I would kick off with the 3rd ball. Every team would kick off with the same ball. It would come right out of the box, and it would basically be nearly hard as a rock. So when you kick it off, instead of going 6 yards deep in the end zone, they're going to catch the ball on the 3-yard line. And now I've got the play. I put the play back in the game. I want the play in the game by being safe. I don't want the answer to be take it out. I want it to be, let's figure out how to keep it, but make it as safe as possible, but give us a play. If we don't run some of the kickoff returns that we did in my history, we don't go in the playoffs. Teams that we just don't go in. We're not in. Well, I like the fact that we went in. So I believe you can do it. Be smart, keep the game safe, keep the player safety in mind, but yet find a way to keep the play. There's ways to do it. And if, I don't know, to me, if you're not sure, call me up. Okay.
Will, got anything else for Mike? I got a few questions left.
Yeah, I'm going to have to run a few minutes, guys.
Go ahead, fire away.
Okay. Oh, well, I'll just wrap it up here, Mike. I just want your thoughts on your book. How long have you been wanting to write a book? And now do you think it's the right time to do that?
Yeah, I really do, man. I retired and I'm not going back. I'm done. That's enough for me. 32 years, 657 games. I always believed I had a good story to tell. I like the story about the guy out of nowhere, the kid that came out of nowhere. He's not the number 1 quarterback. It's not Dan Marino, but he's the guy that came in and helped. And we changed a lot of things in the game, the way the game's played, and helped win the game. I mean, come on, if we don't block the punt at Minnesota with a particular design, that Minnesota wins that game easily. The game's over. But it gave us a chance. I loved that chance. But what I wanted to do was write about it and all the different things that took place. And as the game has changed, then that became more paramount for me. I'll give you a number real quick. My first 30 years in the National Football League, my first 30 years, okay, not counting PATs or field goals, whether you kick them or defend them, not counting those plays, I averaged 22 plays a game, 22. Punts, kickoff returns. Remember, back then, every kickoff was returned. All right, I averaged 22. My 2 years with the New Orleans Saints, 7. I went from 22 plays to 7. So what I want to know is, and I talked to these young coaches, I said, tell me why an owner's not going to walk in for a meeting, he's going to look at the head coach and say, why am I paying this guy $1 million when he's coaching 8 plays? And you better have an answer. So I love that part of the game. I loved where it went. I love the fact that I could help take there and how it transformed itself into a viable part. It has since disappeared some. It doesn't mean it's gone. Of course not. It's certainly not. But do the math. 22, 7, 8, 10. That's it. So, I wanted to be viable, and I wanted to write about that. So the book is Figure It Out. It's available at Mascot Books. Right now, you go Mascot Books, put in Figure It Out. They'll deliver it right to your house. Or in July 12th, you can get it at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. You'll be able to get an audio book, which I recorded. I worked in a studio for 3 weeks. It's my life. I lived it, so I wanted to read it, and I did that. I had help, but I did it. And then also you can get it on an iPad or iBook or anything you want. I think it's a fun story. I love the fact that we interviewed these guys. I didn't conduct the interviews. Barry Wilner's a writer, did the interviews. So you're hearing me tell the story, and then you're hearing Zach Thomas tell the story. You hear Sean Payton tell the story, or Taysom Hill, or O.J. McDuffie, or guys like that. And I think that's what gives it a real credibility, rather than just listen to me talk about what happened. You've got these guys, and believe me, we did it and how they say it. So it's a little bit rated X now. It's a little tough. It's kind of the way that the game was played, and I loved it. I just loved it. So I'm extremely proud. It was the right time to do it because there is a dramatic.
All right. Once again, the book Figure It Out, available now on mascotbooks.com, Amazon in July at major booksellers. Mike, thanks for joining us today. It's been a pleasure. Wish you continued health, happy shark fishing, and hopefully we'll get to talk to you in the future. Thanks a lot, Mike.
Yeah, sure. When it comes out July, maybe I'll come back with you when people are going. I'll be happy to do. You guys had great questions. Pretty doggone smart. Thank you. You did a good job. I'm appreciative. And I worked in the media for a pretty good while, so I'm very pleased with what you did. Thank you.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, Will. Bye.